Yeah. All right, we're recording. Awesome. Thanks for coming today, guys. Hopefully we get some people that trickle in.
Mm-hmm.
So you all were at Bethany's class last week. Yes? How did it go?
Good.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Learning
Right?
a lot of bank accounts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you do need a lot of bank accounts. Maybe you don't need them, but they certainly help develop little pockets.
Do you have a separate bank account for each one of your investment properties?
Not a separate one for each property, but we have, like personally owned properties for premium property group properties for Linus properties. And at different points in time, we did have separate, accounts for each of our personally owned properties, but we kind of got away from that. Just to keep it simple. But like for Steinbach home selling team, we do have a Steinbach home selling team cash account and a tax account. And so there's like different little buckets in there that we use to keep the money separate, as well as using like payroll for Steinbach home selling team. What else? What takeaways did you have from Bethany? Because I watched her deal online or a video of it, and I thought there was some really great information in there. Anybody have anything like remarkable that you thought?
I am really trying to focus on my 4% rule and how to get to that number.
Okay.
Through whether it's, passive income or actively making that money at some point still, or like how does that combination, how are we gonna make that combination work?
Yeah. And any other thoughts on it? Or is it just something you've been thinking about?
No, I kind of came up with a small plan of some actual items we can do now to, try and get a little closer to that number.
A plan is good, right? Easier
Now
to get
action,
where you're
right?
going if you know where it is,
Yeah.
right? Or know how to get there.
The hard thing with that, I think, is you don't know what things are going to do. So is that feasible based on rates and and what you're gonna get back? And so I think that's kind of the hard part with that, is that so much of that can that
Yeah. There's a whole lot of life that is out of our control, right? Yeah. Any other takeaways from Bethany's class, Heather?
I liked her that the real estate goes up 4% a year on average.
Yes.
And this also came into, we also heard this at our ALC clinic yesterday from Gene Rivers. So if you have a property that you're necessarily not having the biggest ROI on, if you hold on to it for 30 years, yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what Bethany was saying, and it's going up. And so she was talking about that first duplex she bought for the 260, 300, whatever it was. And so when you really look at your investment properties from that point of,
Right.
of just the amount of equity that you're what that property's gonna be worth in those years. And then we had that 1031 class, which was going and talking about how to hold that when renting out the taxes and all this stuff. So, so yeah, it was, but that's what I liked. It really made me think that. So I always thought, when I really start to focus on an investment property, I really want to get paid off as soon as possible. That's not necessarily the point.
Right.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't have to be the whole point.
And real estate investing is complicated or it's simple. Right? Which is it? And there's a lot of complication and it can be very complicated, and yet the idea is extremely simple. You buy this house, somebody else pays you presumably more than your cost to own it, so then you make cash flow. They're also, over the life of that loan, paying down your property. In the end, you have potentially a paid off property, but a property that is worth more now than when you bought it, right? And all of that money just accumulates in your back pocket. And when you go to sell it, then there's that money available. Or you can hang on to it forever and just live off that cash flow.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Any other takeaways? Yes, Chris.
I felt like it could start really slow right? But over time, like it gains momentum. It's almost like the like snowball method when paying off like certain kinds of debt. It's a slow process at first, but if you're diligent and you stick to your 5-year plan, like Bethany's said, she was in a totally different space in 2019.
Yes.
Now she's come this far, but like it's just cool to see that. So.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting that you referred to the snowball, and your reference was specifically to the snowball and debt, like the paying off debt, right? And I've been thinking a lot about the snowball, and I think about it a lot because that snowball, like as you're pushing the snowball, if I'm pushing my snowball, there's a point where I feel like I push the snowball over the edge, and now all of a sudden that snowball is just moving. And when it's moving, it's just gaining size, and it doesn't take any effort from me anymore. And that's how I think about the snowball. And I thought about it as I was getting in the elevator, like yesterday, last night, was that snowball, it like has its own momentum after a certain point. And the appreciation is happening whether I'm working or not working, or the property is rented or not rented. Like it's always happening. So it grows faster, slowly. And then when you look back on it after a year, you're like, oh, okay, well, that was $5,000 in principal paid down on that property. That's positive. And it appreciated by 4%. So that's $8,000 or whatever it is, right? And you put that together. Okay, well, I made $15,000 this year on that property. Awesome. Pretty good. And then maybe you end up having a couple of those, right? Ends up being a bigger and bigger number as you go on. Any other takeaways from Bethany's class? She recommended a piece of reading. There's a book, Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. It is, 400 or 500 pages. I read it on the beach in Vieques, Puerto Rico, and whenever it was a while ago. And when I read that, I couldn't have felt more nerdy, because I was like on the beach reading this absolutely terribly dry book. And yet I was like completely enthralled with it, couldn't put it down. And I think I read it in like 4 or 5 days, and it's technical information, just tedious and whatever. And that information was so useful because it ended up helping me figure out ways to eliminate or to greatly reduce our taxes. And with what Bethany talked about in her presentation, I can say that I exactly felt those same things as a result of reading that book specifically, and the impacts that we implemented from the start of our business, but then through the real estate business and the rental business, like everything just works together, and it ends up having a really big impact, such that I feel like we earn good money, and we have a lot of these tools that are working for us, and we pay an extremely low amount of taxes in proportion to like the value that's being generated. So that one's really important. The other piece of reading I would encourage you to is the Blue Book, MREI, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Gary Keller. It's the book's around. If you haven't read it, do it. If you have read it, do it again. And I'll leave it at that. Okay. So let's talk today about the big why. Maybe you have a big why, maybe you don't. When I first started my investing journey, we'll call it, I really went into it with the mindset of I am looking to create passive income such that I can choose whether or not I want to work. It's simple enough, yet I think it ends up being something that people really do overcomplicate. And I didn't necessarily know that it was called freedom. That was the passive income thing was something that it was like the thing that was going to allow me the freedom. And yet the freedom is the thing that I really truly chase, right? And that's freedom to go where I want, when I want, with who I want, basically without having that obligation to anybody else. For us, freedom definitely means travel. And, I think we're doing a pretty good job of getting on that path right now. And definitely been able to travel a lot. The other day, I just started like thinking of the places that we have been in 2024. And there's 2 months in Miami, Mexico City, Bahamas, Vegas a couple times, Laughlin once. Don't make fun of me because that is an old people's destination. I went there for golf. Sicily, France, Phoenix, Vietnam, Austin, local golf trips. And that's in 1 year. And everything that we've set up, I know, right? It's like as we were talking about it, Tara and I, as we were talking about it, I realized that we had completely forgotten about that trip to the Bahamas, and neither of us even remembered that it happened. And yet, that is part of our life. So, the ability to do that is made possible because of the real estate that we own, and the income that comes in off of them is sufficient that we just don't have to make the decisions based on need that I feel like a lot of other people do have to make. They choose the things that they choose because they have to, right? Their obligations are such financially that there is no other option other than to put in the work so that you get the pay. And that's definitely the flexibility that owning real estate has allowed us. Why don't people get into real estate? Anybody know what the biggest thing is? Like why people don't get into real estate investment? Fear, maybe, money. Any other ideas? Obligation?
Some of the knowledge, which is supposed to be feared.
Yes. Yes. Risk is something that we think about with investment real estate. When you buy something, what is the risk? Like what's the absolute worst thing that can happen?
House price. I don't know.
Well, it loses value.
What's that?
Get bad renters. That's what scares me.
And
I don't know how to say that, but I mean, people that might not take care of the house.
yeah,
And it's having to find a contractor, right? So then that is another.
I shouldn't have started this list.
I know.
How about this? Yes, these things. Now who can read those? Yeah, and other things that people are scared about. That's kind of it, maybe.
About another market.
Yes, someone else.
Market crash? Yeah. And I think they're all valid issues, right? And for me, certainly, when we were first getting into it, the thing that I was most worried about is the renters and potentially no renters. That was my biggest fear, was always finding a renter. And I can tell you that after 15 years in rental real estate, like it's just not a thing. You can always find a renter. It may take a little bit of time and they may not be a great renter, but you can always find a renter. And I would encourage you, rather than taking a bad renter, that maybe you look at taking a well-qualified renter who is maybe at a lower rate. Like keep looking, because I'd rather lose $50 to $100 a month than have somebody crappy in my property who's gonna tear it apart. That was always my biggest fear. Fire?
Yeah.
It,
Not good.
No, it is not.
right? I own a property in Wayzata, probably a $400,000 property. And if that property burned down, let's hope it doesn't. If that property burned down, the dirt is still worth $400,000, and I probably get $300,000 in insurance money. So now my $400,000 property is like, has a value of like $700,000 to me. Would that be a bad thing?
Let's not do that.
It's just a big headache.
It is a big headache. It is a big headache. And I would argue, like, what are you gonna have to do to make $300,000 extra otherwise? Like, I'd take on that headache, but that's me. And
I think you have the risk of weather, of tornado, everything along with fire.
everything that can happen. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, we use insurance to like make sure that the really bad stuff doesn't sink us. And then we take on the other stuff as our, like, we're self-insuring a lot of things, all the trees that fall down and basements that flood and furnaces that die. And I mean, the list is long, right? So fear maybe is risk. Maybe we can recharacterize that as responsibility. Say that says that, because the risk, when I look at taking on the responsibility of owning the home, by taking on the responsibility, I'm also taking on the benefits of what that real estate is doing, right? And makes me think of maybe a different word, accountability. Let's say that says that. Accountability. Difference between responsibility and accountability, is there one? Good question. I don't know. But then also along with that, the risk is tolerance. I think you have to weigh in like what your tolerance for that risk is. And by really truly understanding like what the risk is too, and understanding like what the consequences are, I think you can get to a much better place of comfort in dealing with a property or properties or many properties if you understand like what is the absolute worst case scenario. I had a maps coach like 5-6 years ago who was really helping me on thinking bigger and kind of helping me down this path of acquiring these properties. And in a moment where I was paralyzed by fear, he talked me through everything that I felt was the absolute worst case scenario that I was putting together for myself. And after I got done telling him all of the absolute bad stuff, and he like boiled it down and said, okay, well, if that happens, what will you do? And he was helping me come up with solutions for my own problem. And as he's doing that, I'm just becoming more and more comfortable with like that absolute worst case scenario. And what it did is it really opened up my mind to like, okay, maybe the bad isn't really all that bad. And the fire is a perfect example. I maybe didn't articulate it properly, but with the fire example, because I always like really presumed that is like the worst case scenario. What happens to the thing? And all of a sudden the people can't live there, nobody's paying for it, I have to pay for it. We do have loss of rents insurance too. So not only do we have the fire insurance, but when the property's not collecting income, we actually get paid by the insurance company for loss of rents. So that's pretty cool too.
Have you had a lot of your worst case scenarios that you thought have happened to you?
Knock on wood,
Not, no?
no, like, no, I mean, plenty of
Yeah,
pretty
but,
bad scenarios, but
yeah, but when you
yeah.
were thinking of that, that hasn't, it's not like that's,
no, really not. I think my maps coach helped me de-escalate this situation and really get down to the actual facts that are present, what really is going on, and just get to a point of comfort with it. And that's what helped me move on. Most of you know me, but not all. I consider myself optimistic, strategic, problem solving, smart, short attention span, blindly focused, big ideas, low follow through. And I think those things help me in a way, definitely hurt me in some ways. I'm really fortunate that my business partner, Tara, my wife, she is she's a great executor. And she's awesome at taking my ideas and these little things that I like craft together. She's excellent at like implementing them and finishing them and actually like executing the plan, basically doing our construction projects, but everything else operationally, other than finding tenants, is really on Tara. Finding tenants and finding money. I was the one who talked to all of our lenders and got all of our financing set up. And I guess I would encourage you to think about the cumulative effect of your effort over time. And really, maybe more than effort, it's like your input over time, because like calling people today and finding one lead today, it may or may not result in anything. And you could make calls and just go away and nothing would ever come of any of it. But if you show up every day and you make calls every day and you collect contacts every day and then call those people back systematically, that's what you end up creating. Like, that's where you end up creating a business. That's also the same thing when you're buying investment properties. You continue looking for opportunities, and I wrote an offer over here, and then it's not right for that seller at that time. So then I go over here and I'm doing this, but then all of a sudden that guy calls me back, and that guy now has a different property that he acquired by some unknown reason, because that's what happens to people. Like, they just acquire properties, inherit them, or end up having them somehow, or have another property that they didn't tell me about the first time. That happens all the time too. And those things, it's the cumulative effect of your efforts or input over time. Just like buying that first property back in 2010 when we did the first next property. We still own it today. We've got like our second or third renter in there over 14 years. And I haven't been in the property for 10 years, and they just fix stuff and they pay the bill. And now I think we're paying down like $700 or $800 a month in principal, and we don't really cash flow, but they're good renters. And the thing is, that property, I think it's probably worth $5, and I think we owe like 100 and maybe 200 on it or something like that now. And it's like, we don't cash flow significantly on it, but it's continuing to just add to gain value, and we continue to experience the benefits on it. And there's hardly any effort on my part. Like, I have to collect the rent, and then I have to make sure that the mortgage is paid, and that's all happening like automatically. But put that together with the next one we bought, the cumulative effect of that over time. So my real estate background, I got licensed in 2001 as a solo agent. I did form a team and have been operating a team in some fashion for at least the last, I think, 11 years, maybe 12, 13. Learned a lot about leverage over that time, a lot about efficiency and how to make my business better. I'm a 12, 13, 14 time Bold graduate, so I'm a really slow learner. Don't pick up on things very fast. I'm only capable of like taking in one or two good ideas in an entire day's worth of presentation. Like I can really only digest a couple of things. They should be big things, but I'm only capable of taking on a couple. So our story really starts in 2005. We bought a condo in Spring Park, and pre-construction, I was the lead listing agent on it, and definitely drank my own Kool-Aid, like bought this thing, paid $465 for it, and then in 2007 or 2000, by 2007, that thing was probably down to like $275 in value, and by 2008, it was about $200,000 in value. And maybe in Bold, but in some fashion, I got exposed to the personal financial statement, and I learned about like a balance sheet, and I started to understand that my net worth was actually like negative $250,000. And that was a big eye opener. And I recognized that anything that we could do with that property was not going to impact the bottom line. That if I stayed on my current path with that property, that in 5 years, I might be up to like negative $175,000 rather than negative $250,000 net worth. And that was pretty dark. And I also kind of figured out that if I just hung on to that property and did nothing different, that it'd probably take me 10, 15 years to get back to zero. I mean, that's a pretty grim outlook. And I wouldn't like, that's not okay. I mean, it wasn't going to be okay for me for the future, right? So we decided in that time, and this is probably by 2008 or 9, probably 2009, had been exposed to Bold at least once, and it like missed me the first time I took it. I had to take it a second time, and I know the second time I started to get some more ideas on what to do or like how I might be able to make it better. And I almost bought a big boat because I was selling a good number of houses, and I was going to buy a boat. I was going to share the boat with my neighbor, and we were both going to go in on it and own it together, share the expenses, and that was going to be great. He's a commercial realtor. He decided that it wasn't a good time for him, and fortunately for me, it wasn't a good time for him, so it kept me from buying this awful hole in the water. So we ended up choosing to buy a house instead, and we bought a little house in Orono. Not all that little, it's a nice house, a new primary residence. And what we ended up doing was we ended up renting out that condo, and the condo, because it was $465, which was kind of a lot of money at that time, probably more than I was comfortable spending at that time. The mortgage was kind of high on that condo. I think it was probably $2,400 a month, which doesn't sound high right here, but like in today's world. And yet it was a lot of money. And what we found was I was able to rent that. That was more than that, because I was able to rent that property for a $500 a month loss. And yet it made our circumstance better. And it doesn't like make sense when you think about it. Like, how could that be? And what it was we no longer had to pay that expense out of our pocket. So somebody else is carrying the boat, or like the big chunk of that mortgage for us. And by buying this other house in Orono, our payment on that new house in Orono was $1,560 versus like $2,500 or something like that for the condo. And when when you combine that lower mortgage on the new house with the $500 a month that we were losing, or that we were kind of getting back, like it was a $500 a month surplus now. That ended up changing our scenario pretty quickly, and it took me like a month or two of receiving that rent and seeing the difference, like how it was affecting our checkbook. That was as much time as it took me to recognize that, oh wait, this is something that can really work. And so that was August of 2010 that we bought the first next property. Our next property we purchased, closed in November of that same year, so just a couple months later. And we then moved out of the home in Orono, moved into this home in Minnetrista, and we ended up living there for 5 years. We rented out the home in Orono, and that cash flowed immediately. When we bought that house in Orono, it was just like Bethany talked about, how it was a conventional loan, so it was an FHA loan, but she talked about, do you guys remember the FHA loan, 3.5% down? She collected 3% in commission, negotiated up from 2.7. She had seller paid closing costs in there. Her net effect was like a $4,000 earnest money check, and she got like $1,500 bucks back at closing. That's the exact same scenario that I went through in 2010, purchasing that home in Orono. 5% down, 2.7% commission, had seller paid closing costs. And the other thing we did on that one was we prepaid our mortgage insurance, which is something that you can do, not something that is talked about. Maybe, I don't know, can you still do that? Prepay your mortgage insurance?
Yeah, you can do a single print.
And it was a combination of like our credit score, probably the fucker factor from the bank on like how much they believe in the property, and then like maybe our income or something, and they spit out a number, and it was like, I want to say that it cost us like $1,800 or something like that to prepay our mortgage insurance, and our mortgage insurance was going to be like $150 a month. So it was essentially like a 1-year payback on that, and I've never had mortgage insurance again. Anyway, we got into that house for $6,000-7,000 total out of pocket, and like I say, it was cash flowing immediately, and immediately created that opportunity for us to do it on the next property. Like I said, in the Minnetrista house, we lived there for 5 years, and over that time, we probably acquired about 10 properties over those next 5 years as rentals, because during that same time period, we bought, a couple properties, another in Orono that we purchased on contract for deed, one in Wayzata that was a short sale, and then we started doing rehabs. And our first rehab property we bought in Wayzata, I managed the construction project on it, which was a circus, and it took too long, and I spent too much, and that's kind of how rehabs work, especially for me. But that experience in doing the rehab was really instructive, because the system worked, which was kind of shocking to me. You guys have heard maybe of BRRRR. It gets talked about a lot now, and it's buy, rent, or buy, rehab, rent, refi, repeat. And we started doing this because one of my clients talked about it, and he probably heard online. He was pretty into that. But he told me about that, and I was like, okay, I think I can do that. And what we ended up finding was that we had to wait like 1.5 years to do it, because our income wasn't quite sufficient to support it, do it how we needed to do it, and we really needed to do a conventional refi on the back end. We ended up waiting our 1.5 years, ended up getting in with this banker and bank, I guess I should say. And at that point, we ended up getting cleared for construction loans, so we could acquire properties a lot easier at that point. Didn't have to go through like underwriting at that, after that point, or formal like conventional underwriting, which is a big, or was a big game changer for us. Along that, at that same time, when we started rehabbing and holding as rental, we started rehabbing and selling some properties too, to like generate the cash to create or to allow us these opportunities. And the flipping was good. It just served a purpose. I recognized throughout that process that like it didn't go back to that rehab project. When I was doing it, I thought, this is a lot of work. I'm not very good at it. And if I were to just sell this property, essentially, that is like a job too, if I'm doing the management, right? And I wasn't necessarily looking for another job. And especially after we started flipping houses, I was recognizing like, profit on a flip for us was maybe $15,000 to $50,000. And if it takes 6 months to complete a rehab project and it's $15,000, so it's $2,000 a month, like depending on how much time I'm actually putting into it, that might not even be worth it. And that's really what I recognized was like, if I'm going to do something as a job, I might as well do something that I'm really pretty naturally good at, like selling real estate, like just focus my effort on selling real estate rather than doing the rehab thing. Well, it worked out perfectly because Tara had the bandwidth, and she's also a project manager, or had been a project manager at Lifetime Fitness before that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. In 2008, she just came home and told me this job. So that was one of those things that was like a shocker. But with for me, it didn't necessarily make sense for me to be doing that work as a flipper. But if I could put the deal together and then have Tara execute the project, that really did make a lot of sense, because that allows me to operate as the investor, and she can operate as like an employee almost of that rehab. Ended up being a good fit for us for a long time. Today, we own 24 rental units, about 13 million in assets, and it's like trying to evolve into our next
How many rentals?
24. Yeah. The strategies we've used along the way, buying a new primary residence, renting out our existing house. We use the BRRRR method. I say that like, we use the BRRRR method before BRRRR. Like I had never heard about BRRRR, and then I heard BRRRR, and I'm like, yeah, that's what we do. You know, that's a strategy that works. And it was actually funny when I heard about it on Bigger Pockets. I think they're talking about it. The thing, and I'm like, well, that's exactly what we've been doing, which was kind of funny. And like, I've been doing that ever since. The buy and hold tactic has been like the foundational principle for us at the very beginning, and something that I very much believe in. And while the BRRRR method was great for essentially creating equity, because that's what the BRRRR method does. You like are creating value in that house, and then like refinancing and pulling that cash back out. It allowed us to multiply our capital many, many, many times over, and create equity from very little money, or basically no money, just creating all that value in the properties. Because each time we do a project, we're adding, $50,000 to $150,000 in value. And if we refinance it, we can use some of that. Otherwise, maybe we're just keeping the property and we hold that equity as like future opportunity. But that was definitely a foundational principle. So we also did flipping. We did contract for deed, both acquiring properties on contract for deed and selling properties on contract for deed, both of which I would do again anytime. And then we got into the destination property. We bought this condo in Miami and didn't really know how it was going to work out when we bought it, but knew we wanted to do something not here. And the Miami condo has been a great success. We rent it out for 9 months out of the year. It's a furnished rental to one occupant, and them renting it for 9 months pays for us to own it for the year. So we're able to spend 3 months there with basically no out-of-pocket cost. And that's been pretty awesome. Free vacation, anyway.
Jesse, online, wondering if you use a property manager or you guys just do it yourself?
We have done it ourselves. Yeah. Something we talk about all the time, and we've done it ourselves. Specifically because Tara's really pretty good with the properties themselves. And I handle the tenants, so we've just divided up the tasks. And actually, I find that being a rental property operator has created plenty of real estate opportunities for a real estate sales business because there's overlap. And especially as we've kind of graduated to better and better properties, the tenants that are coming from those properties or choosing those properties are high income earning, good job having, well qualified people who generally are either were or have been or will be homeowners, right? They just aren't currently based on whatever their circumstances. So the goals we set, first was one property, and then very quickly, probably in like September of 2010, after I had recognized this rent thing was really going to work, then I set my goal of 5 properties, and I was working out of the Blue Book, the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, and saw the progression in the Blue Book and how how multiplying the properties kind of multiplied the output. And then I went from 5 properties to 10 properties, and once we got to probably 8 or 9, I recognized that 10 just wasn't going to be enough and chose to move to 20. The interesting part of that progression has been that when I first thought about the 5 properties, I thought, okay, if I can buy 5 properties and pay them off, that those 5, like the income from those 5 properties paid off is enough for us to live off forever, right? As long as we can own them and maintain them, they should be continuing to produce rent. We could live off of that money forever. As we held on to the properties a bit longer, I was recognizing that, you know what, the rents are appreciating and we're making more money on those properties. And at that point, probably $500 a month per property in cash flow. And I was like, okay, well, so maybe I don't have to wait 30 years. What does it look like if maybe I have 10 properties or 15 properties and I'm able to pull $500 a month in cash flow off of each of those properties? Maybe I don't even have to have it paid off. Maybe I can have mortgages on them and still be creating enough income sufficient to live my life. As we got further into it, we recognized that as we were leveraging off of our own properties by refinancing and pulling out equity and using that money to purchase other properties, that the cash flow, while it went up, also then started to go down. And then also the longer we own these properties that we've rehabbed, the expenses kind of go up and our profit goes down. And that was kind of an interesting realization for me because it's changing my end outcome from, okay, well, maybe that world doesn't work. Like maybe the cash flow really isn't enough from those properties to continue to live off of for the rest of my life. So we had to like think about it differently again and figure out where to get to. And I think back to at some point in time, this is before 2005, or maybe between 2005 and 2008, probably when when the market sucked, because I talked to one of my childhood friends, a kid that I knew from like first or second grade until end of high school. Really don't know, haven't connected much after college. He's really smart though, and he's he puts people to sleep, right? When they're having
Anesthesiologist.
Thank you, an anesthesiologist, and he's freaking smart, and he always has been. And I'm smart enough to realize that he's way smarter than me. But when we were talking down at the Loop downtown, and and it had been a while since we talked, and I think I must have said something to him about being nervous about not having it figured out. And he said something to me along the lines of like, well, I've never been worried about you because I know you're smart enough to figure it out, and you'll just figure out some great way to do it that's really different than everybody else. And I was like, well, thanks. I appreciate that. But the thing that he said to me that was really impactful was, Darik, what I've realized is that if I can, as an anesthesiologist, if I can save up $2, $3, $4 million, all I have to do is invest that very conservatively, and the interest off of that money is enough for me to live off of, and I never have to work again. I was like, okay, I could get on board with that. Now I only need to find this $2, $3, $4 million. But I keep going back to that because even though the market has changed a lot and life has changed a lot, it still really does come down to that. Like, that is freedom in itself. If you have all that money, you can just live off of the money that money makes. You don't ever have to touch the big nest egg. You just live off the interest, and that's enough to live sufficiently for a long time. So we currently are in a place where we are converting our properties from actively managed rental units to we're transitioning to some more passive products, which we can talk about in another session. But the passive thing is like, we're buying into an apartment, a large apartment complex, and we own it with like 25 other people, and we are able to 1031 into that. And I get a check for $871.71 and like 13th of the month every month. And it showed up while we were in Vietnam. Yay. But it's really exciting because that is like the indicator that it actually works and it is actually happening for us right now, right? I would encourage you to think about what your goals are and what you need to do to get. Does anybody have any real estate related goals? Yeah? Does anybody care to share what some of those are? Just one? Chris?
Oh, I have. Really seen
Go ahead.
In the front row.
Yeah, so I want to buy a duplex to rent out. Right.
Awesome. That's a great idea. Yes. You think you can do it?
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, it's interesting, kind of vacillating, and I love hearing your thoughts as far as rental properties versus flipping.
Yeah.
So my husband, as you guys know, is a contractor.
Yeah.
And so, this has kind of been on our radar for a number of years. Now that I have my real estate license, which I'm absolutely loving,
Yes.
I just wonder, because we've got definitely some funds at this point, and
Yeah.
wondering what direction to go. And so hearing what you're saying, I mean, I would love to have my number be at 5
Yeah.
or 25, but
Yeah.
what does that mean? Did that mean we were going to flip them? Because that's kind of been,
Right.
that's kind of in our wheelhouse.
Right.
But now you have me, my wheels are turning.
Yes. That's awesome. Wendy?
I have a question for you. Well, two things. One, being a hospitality girl.
Yeah.
I thought about doing like a VRBO
Yeah.
that I could trick out really cool that would be in a location where people come for events, activities,
Yes.
fun
Yes.
and would love the energy and vibe and bring me money.
Yes.
But besides that, you talked once before, just I think in a conversation we were having about changing, going from kind of a bare minimum clean split for rentals with laminate countertops and basic carpet to premium finishes
Yes.
and the difference in the renters that you
Yes.
got and what you were able to charge. And then the other thing I was curious about is when you first started this, I'm assuming you and Tara set a pretty tight budget for yourselves to live on in order that you had enough other money to put other places. You guys weren't living the lifestyle you are now. You weren't
Right.
traveling X numbers of days a year. You were living. And how long did you need to live in that kind of narrow zone to get to the
Yeah.
abundance of?
Yes. Delayed gratification. Yeah. Yes. So on the hospitality thing, I love it. And you can do things like Airbnb, like kind of on your idea on a more basic level. We do it with our mid-length rentals. They're fully furnished. They're awesome. They're like really awesome places, or at least I think they are. And places that people will pay a premium to live in. And yeah, I mean, I have to share my bed with somebody else, but I do that everywhere else. Like, don't you? Because if you stay in an Airbnb, you have to sleep in somebody else's bed, right? Just my bed, right? I don't know. It doesn't bother me. It bothers a lot of people, but the thing I would say with a hospitality and or Airbnb thing is that if you're operating yourself, you are definitely taking on another job, and there's going to be like problems and drama and just stuff that you need to deal with that, and that becomes a point of like, is your time better spent there, or is it better spent on selling real estate? And I know that's kind of boring, but the reality is, as realtors, like when we're doing our job, we make really pretty good money. Like I mean, I can't complain. I guess I can when I'm not selling stuff, but right. So that's something I think about. I know Christy does it really well with her Airbnbs, and she should, because she has great systems, and Kelly, and like she's got it all figured out. I'm not that smart. Like I can't juggle that many balls at once. With the personal budget, I'm glad you brought it up. We live pretty lean, and for somebody that traveled to like all these different places this year, I know it doesn't sound lean, and yet I'd be willing to share our financials on our trips and travel. It just doesn't cost us all that much to travel because there's only two of us, and we don't stay at super top end places. We don't eat super expensive meals. We don't rough it. We don't there's no camping or hostels or anything like that, but we definitely, and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year rehabbing properties. We've collected a lot of airline miles and stuff. And like Bethany talked about house hacking, we definitely travel hack. We definitely life hack. And that's where like the vacation rental thing, like we do with the property in Miami, and now a couple of condos here in Minneapolis, like those things end up allowing us to reduce our monthly housing expense. And I consider our personal housing expense $2,000 a month, because that is the mortgage payment on our 409 condo, which is our primary residence. The reality is that now we're moving from condo to condo on like a 3-month rotation between 409 and 410, which are across the hall from each other in our building in Minneapolis. Sounds stupid. It's kind of cool. And the place in Miami. So we rotate around those three. And the circumstances on that Miami place are really similar to the circumstances on the Minneapolis condos in that cumulatively renting those properties for the time that we're not in them, it disproportionately pays us for when we are in them. So our $2,000 a month gets zeroed out when we're in Miami. When we rent 409, that's good. I don't know how it ends up working out, but the 410 unit is kind of like a luxury to us. We're living there right now, so that feels pretty cool because it's an awesome condo. But we do have a higher cost expense right now currently. But our house in Minnetrista was really probably our best experience in understanding what like our personal cost was. And it became apparent when we were living there that our lifestyle needed to be a little bit different because of owning that house and living in that house. And it's two of us in like a 3,000 square foot, 2-story unfinished basement, like way more, and 15-year-old pug. We needed like 30% of that house. And it just didn't make any sense for us to live there anymore. So we rented it out, and that thing really crushes right now. Like really do well because we've got like a 2.75 mortgage on it. So the thing that we've done is I started paying myself a $5,500 a month salary a long time ago, and it hasn't changed. And so that's Steinbach Home Selling Team pays payroll to Darik and Tara $5,500 a month, and there is like a small bonus draw. Let's call it I think it's like $850 a month or something like that. That is a bonus draw from Steinbach Home Selling Team to us to help cover our personal expenses. What that has done all along is gives us money to survive. It builds up money in the Steinbach Home Selling Team account, and we can use that in addition to like having our operating budget covered by that. We can then use that money for investments or to acquire properties. We also have another account off of that one that's a savings account, and we call it our tax account, and that's we transfer $2,500, $3,000 a month, something like that, into that tax account, and it's like forced savings brought about by us having a big tax bill one year because I didn't collect for taxes. And sure enough, we ended up having a big tax responsibility that was overdue. And we had to work on that in like 2011 or something like that, 2012, where I had big real estate income years and didn't have the money to pay for it. Scary.
And it's salary and bonus draw and tax is coming from Steinbach, which is your real estate career.
Correct.
From selling and buying and selling homes. Your commissions.
Transacting real estate for clients. Yes. And Bethany talked about that a bit. And I think that it's just something that really gets overlooked for people until they start running their real estate business like a business. They're not going to be doing that. And I know that I had commissions just going into our personal checking account, and that's just a disaster. Like
For the you paying the salary, did you then set up your Steinbach, or was it already set up as a business, like an S corp or something like that?
Yeah.
Before you did that, so for tax purposes, it also looks like a salary?
Yeah, it was all kind of at the same time. We kind of grew up, started using an accountant, started using a payroll service, kind of legitimized everything, became an S corp, and once we started that and really started working with the accountant too, we had a family accountant for a long time, and he's awesome, did a good job, was located elsewhere, so we didn't necessarily have the opportunity to communicate in person very often. And once we started working with Brock, our accountant now, he's local in Minnetonka and he's been great. I just take him my ideas or I read the book, right? And I immediately took like 2 hours with him and like, how do we do all this? You know, can we do this? And he helped us set up the systems to do it the right way so that, not only so that it legitimizes the business, but it also allowed us to acquire conventional financing and even look better to the commercial lenders, look more attractive to them. So the thing I would encourage you to do is think about solving life problems with real estate, because I know that that's definitely the way we look at it. Like when we have a problem that we're looking to overcome, how am I solving that with real estate? Because this summer, weather really stunk here for a while, right? Rained for like 2 months straight, and seasonal affective disorder I'm self-diagnosing. I am definitely impacted by gray days. And in June or whatever, I'm like this stinks here. Like I am never happy. I don't want to be here anymore. And the first thing that we're thinking about is, okay, well, what could we do to change that? And obviously we can go travel travel every other weekend or something and come back and do my work. Or what does it look like if we actually just live somewhere else and I travel back forward? Like, is that maybe an option? And I really was going a long ways down this rabbit hole of buying a bigger condo in Miami, of all things, because that seems like a great way to solve a problem. But what I really wanted to do was I needed something somewhere else, and we thought about like where else that could be. It doesn't make any sense. The thing is, the 2 bedrooms in Miami now are like $1 million, and I don't want to spend $1 million on a condo for myself. I can't afford that. And what we ended up coming up with, and I talked to Christy Kimbrell for a while about it, and she didn't actually tell me what to do, but just talking to her helped me kind of self-discover what the thing to do is. We just move into the place in Miami or spend additional time in the place in Miami. Maybe don't come back to Minnesota in March or come back to Minnesota in April. So we ended up solving that problem by just spend more time in Miami, and maybe I can come back more often, but we've lived there for a longer period of time. The problem is we live here and travel, take long weekends every couple of weeks. We can't take Linus. So it makes more sense to have Linus in Florida permanently. I'll be fine. It works. At least I think it should work. So what are the problems that you guys think? Is it like paying for school for children, creating a legacy, fund a vacation home, cover your own personal living expenses, pay for a car, etc., rather than saving the money to do those things? What does it look like if you buy a property, get renters in that, maybe make a little money along the way, but if your children are young, you've got 10, 15 years to rent that property out and let it appreciate. The appreciation and principal reduction should be something that you can look at, and you should be able to calculate what the outcome looks like in 10 or 15 years. Should be. You know how you do that?
Some kind of calculator. I don't know.
Right? An amortization schedule will tell you how much you're going to pay down over a prescribed period on your loan. So it's just a math equation, and you can do it on any of the, it's math, right? I've heard. It is math. I know how to do it on a spreadsheet. And you can figure out, okay, so over 10 years, we're going to pay down $45,000 in principal on this. And also over those 10 years, you're going to appreciate by 3.5%, 4% per year over each of those 10 years. And I mean, that's a historical number, the 4%, But I mean, at least as long as we've owned real estate, we've been seeing something similar to that. I guess we had the crash in 2007. Didn't work out well, but it caught up. And ultimately with that condo, by the way, we can go back to that. We ended up selling it for a loss in like 2018. I think we sold that property for a loss, and it was I think we sold it for 350 and we had purchased it for 465. So we lost 115,000, but we actually had equity in it when we sold it. How does that work? I don't even remember. Ultimately, we ended up taking the proceeds from that sale, 1031 into another property, owned that one for, I think 3 years, 1031 that one into a duplex down at the U and made about another $150,000 on that. And then took that money and bought 3 houses in Edina. And those properties have done well. Like the money that we invested in the DST thing, that 1031, the 871.71 a month that we're collecting now, the passive income, that money was from that original condo that we lost our tails.
Yes, it's the Delaware.
Yeah, Delaware Statutory Trust. Yeah. The thing about that loss on the Spring Street condo is that we actually did have a ton of depreciation, which was one of the things that Bethany talked about last week. And that depreciation, we were able to devalue our income every year because that property, condos have a high depreciation number because they have a low land value. That $465,000 condo had a land value of $20,000, and which means that like $440,000 of that was depreciable. And what that ended up meaning for us was, I think it was something like a $15,000 annual reduction in our taxable income, which for us means something between like $5,000 and $7,000 or $8,000 in actual tax savings. Which to me was that was a big deal, especially when you figure we probably owned it for 10 plus years, no, 13 years. Yeah, what is that? $50,000 to $75,000 ended up working out all right. So anything that no, let's go back because we got to wrap up. What do I see as opportunities right now? Maybe contract for deed properties, because contract for deed is a way for you potentially to get into a property without needing to pay, put down a large down payment. Maybe you can get into something like that for 10% down. I know we did on the property that we purchased on contract for deed. Also might be a way for you to get away from the high interest rates that are impacting buyers right now. Because there are people right now in the market who are could be desperate to sell, but definitely highly motivated to sell, and definitely frustrated with the market, not feeling like they're going to sell. And especially over the next 45 days, that panic and anxiety builds in those people. And I think it creates opportunities for us to take advantage of. Sorry, John. That doesn't sound very good. Take advantage. Capitalize, right?
That's why I'm here, Darik.
Right? Well, if they're not your client, you can take advantage. Right. Right. Disproportionate value purchases due to overeager panic sellers. That could be same scenario, not necessarily purchasing on contract for deed, but I know that there's properties out there right now that will sell for maybe 80 or 85 cents on the dollar, just because people have the false deadline in their mind of, I got to have this thing sold by winter, or I got to have it sold by New Year's, or it's got to sell before this date. And they're not seeing any showings. That means that they'll sell it for less than it's worth. And that should be the condition that you want to buy a property in. Special finance opportunities. You guys can probably talk about that. There's probably opportunities out there maybe, first-time home buyers can get into properties. There's some down payment assistance programs, things like that, right? Government programs, and also are always buying a new primary residence, which I think is the absolute #1 way for everybody to get involved with investment real estate is just buy a new primary residence. And I know there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't work for me, or it doesn't work for you, or, there's all of the excuses that people use for that not to work for them. And yet I know that it'll work. And I know that that's a way that you can get into a house with 10% down or 5, right? Yeah. And usually it's a combination of like money and ultimate payment. That's like the reason why people don't want to, like, down payment money. Why people don't want to get into or acquire a rental property. And that's certainly a way to overcome it. I mean, what if the idea was, what if you bought that next primary residence, and what if that isn't your forever home? Like, maybe you're in your forever home, but what if you take a break from it for 2 years and buy this other property, live in that property for 2 years, rough it. Maybe it's fun for the kids. Then rent that property out and come back to your primary. I mean, I don't know, maybe that doesn't happen. Could. You'd do it. Yeah, you did. See, I knew.
It was fun. They loved it.
Right? Yeah. All right. Who's got questions?
Question. It's not kind of related to anything that we talked about,
Awesome.
but kind of touches on the apartment. Would you ever invest in a real estate project that's not in America? Like, do you ever see yourself like using all this travel and you're like, yeah, I could see like myself investing in condos in Vietnam, or like, I don't know.
Right.
Think about that?
Yeah, last week, in Vietnam, sure. Yeah. More of my interest on those lines is doing something. I would acquire an international property if I could buy like a really old, like, stone hut, and it's got to be in a really, really premium location. And there were places in Croatia that I thought were really cool, like right by the water, not a lot of amenities. We could go in and rehab it and make it really cool. And that's something I could get my hand on. Yeah.
Biggest thing you have to worry about with any international purchases, you're dealing with other governments. And
Yeah.
you gotta be really, I mean, there's been people that have went bought in certain places, I won't name them, that end up losing their, it's just gone.
Yeah.
You gotta be real careful with that.
Yeah.
I think you start with this.
Yeah, right. Because you don't know what could happen with the government in any of these places. And
Yeah.
certainly that's something that I thought about with Vietnam.
I've
was
got
like-
friends that have places in Haiti.
In Haiti, yeah, right?
Not good.
Really close to a nice place. Yes, and so we looked very seriously at buying a house in Turks and Caicos a long time ago, 10, 12, 14 years ago. And we ended up coming up with a number of things that were really not not favorable for us to purchase. One was the highest loan to value that they would even consider, the bank would even consider down there, was a 50% loan to value, meaning we needed to bring 50% down. And that was even kind of aggressive for them. So it was 50% down, and it was like a 15-year amortization with a 10-year note. So the bank isn't willing to lend long-term on that. And I want to say at that time, the rates on those were like 7 or 8% there. And we had to use financing in Turks and Caicos. Ultimately, that really goofed up the numbers. And couple that with kind of discovering that it was going to be probably an 8 to 12 hour day for us to get there. just didn't seem like something that we could really do and like that was really gonna work for us.
Enjoyable, like
Yeah.
for the moment. like,
Yeah, yeah. And, or if you just need to go do something or if like, you gotta lay eyes on it so I can handle something for the tenants or whatnot, you know? And I mean, looking back on it, it was, because we considered it at multiple points in time purchasing property in Turks and Caicos, because that's what you do. The first time we looked at it, it was a condo, and that was about the same time that we bought the other condo that stunk. And had we purchased that condo in like 2006 or 7 or whenever it was, probably just pre-crash, we would have been totally screwed on that, like totally. And because that went down big time too, and we just wouldn't have. And that one could have been a terrible disaster. The other one was like, which was a couple of years later, probably 5 or 6, 7 years later, single family home down there. And I like a huge regret purchasing. It wasn't feasible at the time. It didn't make sense for us at the time. And looking back, I mean, it's probably tripled in value by now. And I'd love to have a property there as well. It was in a cool spot. So, yeah, something I would consider. Any other questions? No?
Just keep talking there.
Just keep talking.
I know. right?
It's great.
It
Thank
was
you.
so good.
Yeah.
So much.
So I sent Candy a couple things. And she can send out to you guys a personal financial statement, which would be a great way to, if you haven't completed the one that Bethany gave you, it would be a great way for you to assess what your own personal situation is right now. Maybe it's a starting place. Maybe you've done it in the past. If you've ever completed a loan application, it's very similar to that. It just quantifies everything and puts it all in one place, boils down the numbers. And I know that Bethany said that she checks it monthly, does like a monthly checkup. I do update ours monthly. Around the middle of the month, I go in and update them. And that, I go as far on that as basically updating my loan amounts on our properties. I don't update our like our personal checking accounts because those don't really fluctuate that much. I don't even mess with any of our other investments because I don't care about them. Like 401ks and stuff, because I don't understand that stuff. Like they go up and down and I get that, but it's like where those numbers actually come from, I just don't really understand that. And that's really why I love real estate, because like it's a tangible thing and I can understand it. I know how it makes money. I know that there's not some like corporate bigwig that's like screwing the company because like it's just us, right? Yeah, that was it. The other thing I would really encourage you to do is just think about it. Try to buy that property, figure out a way to make it work, and just get started. Because I am certain that when you do that, you will have a moment like I had where you understand that it's really pretty simple. Like it's not uncomplicated. It is very simple. And when you see that, okay, I've got the cash flow, these people just pay me to live in my house, and you've got the cash flow, that principal reduction is just happening month after month after month. Every month that gets a little bit bigger and you're just making more and more and more money. Gosh, it's just such a powerful tool. And pretty soon that snowball is rolling in front of you rather than pushing it. Right? Because there were times where I was pushing that sucker uphill. And
Now it's dragging you.
right. Holding on while it's going downhill. No, it's not.
All these like Grinch references, I just have the movie and all that poor dog is just Max's.
Oh, the snowball's pulling you up.
Right?
Thanks so much, Darik.
Oh, that was so good.
Awesome.